Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Widow podcast. It's so lovely to have you here with us again. And I say us because today I am so delighted to be able to share a wonderful lady's story with you. Debbie is a widow herself. She is a mum to two girls, grown-up girls, but nevertheless, two girls. And she came to me about, when was it, Debbie? Was it October 2019?
No, I think it was
2020.
2020. Yes.
And joined my very first Finding Hope in Widowhood group, and we've chatted a lot since that time, and watching Debbie on her journey has been truly inspirational. It really has. She's a wonderful lady with such a huge heart and a very inspirational outlook on life, and I have just been watching her flourish and grow, and I wanted Debbie to come on and share her story with you, to offer you some hope wherever you are in your grief, because that's exactly what Debbie does, and she does it so well. So Debbie, hello.
Hi Karen, how are you?
Oh, good. It's so lovely to have you here. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you for asking me.
Oh, honestly, I know this is going to be amazing. I just know it is. We've obviously chatted about what we're going to talk about, and yes, your story is very heartwarming. So to start off, do you want to tell us about your story and how you entered the world of widowhood?
Yes, of course. It was Friday, the 23rd of March, 2018, and I'd gone out with some girlfriends from work. A couple of colleagues were leaving that night, so we'd gone out to have something to eat, and we were driving in between the pub and where we were going for the leaving do, and my daughter Kelly gave me a telephone call to say that her dad, Paul, had collapsed in the local school gym. And she was obviously upset. And fortunately, as we were driving, my one friend took me straight to the school. And I can just remember having this absolute feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. I just had a feeling that it wasn't going to be a good outcome. Paul had his first heart attack when he was 38. It was a mild heart attack. And then when he was 43, he had 2 stents fitted. So obviously, he had a heart condition, but, since we had the stents fitted, he'd been absolutely fine and well. She dropped me off at the school. I got to the gym and I ran down to the school gym, and the paramedics were already there performing CPR. And I just took one look at Paul and I just knew he'd gone. My eldest daughter, Jodie, she'd got there first, and bless her, she was in the gym. She didn't want her dad to be on his own. So she'd gone straight in there, and she just didn't want him to be by himself. And Kelly arrived a few minutes afterwards, but she chose not to go in there. She stayed in the corridor outside. It shocked me to watch them doing CPR on him. I just didn't realise how physical it was, and it looked so violent as well to me at the time. And part of me wanted to just shout at them to stop it, but obviously not, just to carry it on as well. The paramedics were asking me questions, but I literally couldn't speak at all. My mouth was so dry, I didn't know what to say. One minute I was driving to a leaving do, and the next minute I was watching my husband lying on the floor and them attempting to give him CPR. Basically, he'd suffered a massive heart attack. He was 53. They think he'd been on his own. He'd had the heart attack when nobody else was in the gym. So they think he'd been on his own for about 10 or 15 minutes when somebody found him, and they'd started performing CPR. Obviously the paramedics arrived, their ambulance arrived as well. And it just felt all so surreal. And after a while, they asked me and Jodie to leave the gym, and they took us into, some of the staff at the school took us into a side room. And I think they asked us to do that they were going to make the decision to stop trying. They'd probably been trying for about 15 minutes then. at some point while they were giving CPR, one of the paramedics thought she'd found a pulse. And I remember Jodie and I just looking at each other, we just think, oh God, thank God for that. But she was mistaken. And no, they took us into a side room, and then a doctor just came and explained to us that there was nothing more they could do and that he'd gone. And my girls were just beside themselves. And I just sat there just in absolute total disbelief, Karen. Even now it's giving me a dry mouth, taking me back to that time, because that's just exactly how I feel. I just didn't know what to think, you know. And I didn't cry. I didn't, you know, like you always imagine if you're going to get really bad news, you collapse on the floor. But none of that happened. I think I was just in shock at the time. I asked if I could go and see Paul, and I went into the gym and got down on, I remember kneeling down onto the floor where he was, put my hands around his head, just to cup his face. But there was blood all on the one side of his head. He had caught his head as he must have collapsed, and had quite a nasty head wound. I told him how much I loved him, and that I would always look after our girls. I remember wanting all the paramedics to go out the room so I could just be with him on my own, but you don't think of that at the time, do you? And then Jodie came in and said her goodbyes as well. Kelly chose not to. She decided she just didn't want to do that. And then it was just the rest of the evening then was just trying to find his belongings. Paul had driven in his car, Jodie was in her car, Kelly was in hers as well. So trying to find his car keys and just all having to drive home separately and individually. And I just thought, it just feels so unreal. We got home, picked up the dog, went down to my mum and dad's, told how do you tell anybody what's just happened when it's just come completely out of the blue. Then started ringing around Paul's family. He's got a big family. Paul's the youngest of 6, to let them know. And then I was given a telephone number to make a call to the hospital because they told me where they would be taking Paul. And for 2 hours, nobody knew where he was. That he hadn't turned up at the hospital. And I thought, how can you just lose my husband? Where is he? And in the end, my sister and her son Joe came up, and they ended up driving up to the school, and the hospital was still, the ambulance was still there. And because the police were now involved, because Paul had died in a public place, my nephew had to identify him. And then I remember the police coming back then with Paul's wedding ring and a dress ring, which I never even thought of when I walked out of the gym. It didn't even occur to me to take those with me. And some money he'd got in his pocket because he was going to get a Chinese on the way back from the gym for him and Jodie. And it was just, I keep using the word surreal, but that's the only word that I can just... You
are thrown into this world, aren't you, that makes no sense.
No.
And how do you process that you know, somebody that you love and that you've shared your life with, all of a sudden that's it, that they're not here anymore, they're gone. Yeah. Like that's not something that you just kind of can adapt to and understand.
Yeah.
Straight away. And you know, your point was really interesting about, you know, you didn't cry straight away. And I remember somebody saying to me in an interview, what did you do? Did you break down and cry? Did you wail? And the same, you know, it was just, no, it was the next day for me. And I think the same for you, wasn't it? You'd said it was the following morning that you cried.
Well, my family offered to stay with us that night, but I just wanted to be me and the girls. And we just went up, we all got into our bed, and the girls were crying. And I can just remember, I think I just sat up all night just saying, oh my God, oh my God. And I think I said that for about 3 days continuously. You know, I've known Paul since he was 11 years old. We met when we started secondary school. We started dating at 17. We got married at 24. And, you know, in total, we've been together for over 36 years. And I've been with him more than I've been without him. And he, as you know, passed away just 5 months short of our, would have been our 30th wedding anniversary. He was and still is the love of my life.
Absolutely.
And, you know, she said, Karen, how do you start? Where do you even start to process that? And you don't, do you? You just, you
takes
don't.
a long
And you
time.
can't.
Yeah, it's like you say, you know, even now, you know, sometimes I still have those moments where you kind of go, Simon died. Simon actually died.
Yeah.
He's not here anymore. And it can still kind of take your breath away at times, can't it? That you think, they're gone, they went, that was it. That was the end of their story. And it does, it really does catch you unawares. So you were, it was just after your 54th birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah, 6 days afterwards.
6 days afterwards. And you say 5 days after Kelly had come home after a 3-week holiday to Australia. She just turned 23 and Jodie was 27. How do you feel that you all dealt with your grief? Did you come together? Did you do it separately? What did you notice went on for the three of you?
I would say initially we all came together. You know, we were inundated with visitors, family, friends. We didn't turn anybody away. It was an open door. I thought if people were brave enough and to come and see us, because it's not easy, and if they were brave enough to come see us, then the least I could do was open that door and they were welcome to join us. We had so much support, and you know, with the arrangement of the funeral as well, you know, we were very much, that was very much a family decision, me and the girls, to decide what to do. You know, how do you even start to arrange a funeral? You know, it's one minute Paul was dead, being pronounced dead, and 4 days later you're trying to arrange a funeral. You know, they asked me, the funeral directors came to the home, which I was very grateful for. We didn't actually have to go there, so they came to the home and they were asking us all these questions. So I'm sure I must have just sat there with a blank expression on my face. Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know. I decided to go down the route of a humanist funeral because I wanted it to be all about Paul and him and his life. I also knew he'd want me to buy the cheapest coffin they'd got. So that was one thing that I was pretty sure I made the right decision on. If it's going to be burnt, you don't spend your money on it. And the rest, we just did the best under the circumstances.
Is there a part of you sort of afterwards that you'd wished you'd had the conversations about what happened if the worst was to happen to either of you?
Possibly. I knew we both wanted to be cremated. I think that's the only thing we'd ever. And there was always a song that Paul always used to say, when I die, I want you to play this song at my funeral. Aww. You know, I haven't got a funeral song. It's never even come on my radar, but he had a funeral song. And I couldn't remember it. And it really upset me. And I thought, that's the one thing he wanted me to do, and I can't remember what it was. Fortunately, Kelly remembered. So that was good. But no, I don't feel as though it's a conversation we should have had or didn't have. I got to choose the type of funeral that I wanted for him, didn't I?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, actually, because yes, it's about the person, but for me, and we all think differently, and that's okay, but for me, it's about the people left behind and how they want to say goodbye and honor their loved one. And I think you're right. You know, it's nice to think about little things that they'd like, maybe, but for the most part, it's you remembering them, isn't it?
Yeah. If I'd have asked Paul, he'd probably said, I don't want anyone there.
Yeah,
I don't want any fuss. Don't waste your money. You know, so we got to choose the type of funeral that we would have liked for Paul. So I think we grieved together through that process. Having a conversation with the girls, they both dealt with it very differently. Kelly dealt with her grief by shutting down. She pushed it to the back of her mind. She went into denial. She sort of adopted the attitude there's always someone worse off than you, so what she got to be so sad about. She didn't like crying. She was embarrassed by getting upset. She reminded me that she had eyelash extensions 6 weeks after Paul passed away to force her to stop crying. So she didn't, because she just didn't want to do that at all. She saw the pain that Jodie and I were in, and she felt she got to be strong for us. And if she cried, she knew it would upset us.
Could you see that at the time, or is that something you've reflected on?
No, not at the time. No, not at the time. And I think, you know, I say we all grieved together, and I feel that we did, but also you're so buried in the shock. You know, it wasn't expected. It came completely out the blue. So you're buried in your own shock. And maybe, you know, you feel that you're all together, but also individually you're in your own little world of grief, aren't you?
And I think, you know, from speaking to people, that there is usually one child, if there's more than one, that will take on that role of almost like, I've got to be okay because I've got to look after everyone else, and kind of feels that they have to step up almost into that other parent's place.
But Jodie felt like that as well. She felt that she'd got to be, being the eldest daughter, she felt that she'd got to look after me and Kelly. So they were both thinking the same. But so Kelly did it in the way she hid her grief, but Jodie, you know, we spoke about it, we cried together, we could talk about Paul, we could look at photographs where Kelly couldn't. We couldn't watch any videos of him, not for a long time. Jodie was a doer, just like her dad, so she would do the practical things. You know, she still wanted to go and do the shopping, she would put a wash on, she'd take the dog for a walk. So her way of protecting us was by her sort of doing all the tasks that Paul would have normally done as well, really. So they both dealt with it very differently. One didn't want to talk about it, one did, but both also felt as though they wanted to protect me and each other as well. So
and what about you? Did you want to talk about it?
Yes, I've always been very open with my feelings, and you know me, I do like to talk. And I did, yes, I did. But my you know, we all slept in my room for until the funeral. So it's not like we all went off together. We were together every night up until the funeral, and then we decided that was time then to go back into our individual rooms. And so we did grieve together, but all in very different ways.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how we do all do it so differently? You know, and I think that's sometimes quite hard when you're in the midst of grief and you're doing your thing your way and somebody else is doing it differently. It's quite hard, isn't it, in the depths of those moments, because you worry so much about your children and how they're handling things and what's going on. And
it worried me a lot that Kelly wasn't grieving how perhaps I perceived she should be. And you know, and it caught up with her in the last few months of last year. You know, she started not feeling like herself at all. In her words, she's quite happy for me to say, she was depressed, she was having panic attacks, she was feeling anxious, she was being sick, and she realised that she needed some help. And I think she buried all her emotions for such a long time. They have to find a way out, don't they?
They do.
And fortunately, you know, she realised that she needed some help and support, so she sought some counselling, and she's well into that now, and it's really helping her. Good. It's really helping her.
And do you know what? I think that's brilliant that she's even acknowledged that she needed that help, that's what was going on for her, and reached out for that help. Because it's not easy, is it?
No,
not easy at all. And it does have a real sort of physical effect on us, hugely. And that's exhausting. And I know it's, you know, it's been a challenging time for you all, because you know, however old your children are, you know,
still my babies.
And you want to make sure they're okay, don't you?
Absolutely. But you know, both my girls are so lucky. They've got such wonderful friends and good, strong friendship groups as well, that their friends have been there for them through thick and thin. And you know, as a mom, I'm so grateful to my girls' friends that have been there for them.
That's amazing.
And still are, you know, because they didn't always want to talk to me, Karen, because they didn't want to upset me. So, you know, and I know that my family have been there to support both my girls as well, and they've turned to them rather than me.
do you know, I think that the crux of it is our support networks, isn't it? You know, it's through our connection with others. And what I loved about you, Debbie, and you said it just now, that, you know, if anyone was brave enough to come to you, to knock on your door, to approach you, to say something, you embraced it, because you recognize that that really isn't easy. And
that's right.
You know, there's a lot of kind of angst out there, isn't there, about how people respond to you in grief, and the things people say and do, and we as grievers get quite frustrated. But you know, I certainly think that we have a place in helping others to support us, because it's not easy approaching someone that's in the depths of despair like that. You know, you're so worried about what you're going to say, what you're going to do, if it's going to upset someone, that you know, you're not be enough, you're not going to be able to solve their problems, and there's nothing you can do, and we can be a bit snappy, can't we, and a bit kind of in our grief. But I think that's just so lovely that you, even in the depths of despair, that you acknowledged that and embraced people and appreciated it, because you know, it's not always easy to see that when you're
and I felt that if I shut the door in their face, they may not come back. And nobody wants that, do they? No.
So who did you turn to for support then, to help you learn to cope with your grief?
Firstly, it would have been my parents and my sister Denise. They were incredible. My sister literally packed a suitcase and moved in with us for probably about 2 weeks, together with my niece Meg, who came around to support, you know, Jodie and Kelly too. My sister made sure we had the basics. She did the food shopping, along with my mom. She took care of all the visitors that came. You know, you realise very quickly you've not got enough tea and coffee, and don't you?
Milk
turns up. Milk. You know, she went with Jodie to take the dog for a walk. My dad took over all the cooking. Not that we felt like eating, but there was always a meal there if we wanted it, and it was his way of helping and his way of coping as well. And my sister took time off work to help with all the paperwork and the funeral arrangements as well. As I say, for about 3 to 4 weeks, our house was just full of visitors. So, you know, it was just that support was there. I count myself fortunate as well that I get on well with Paul's family. I've got friends who have been and still are there for me as well. So I feel like we had a very supportive network around us. As for coping with grief, that's a strange one. You know, how do you? Excuse me.
That's all right.
So I'll just turn you off my mobile there. You know, you don't suddenly wake up one day, do you, Karen, and think, oh, I'm coping with this. It's, in the early days, it's just literally getting out of bed, making a cup of tea, muddling through the day, the never-ending paperwork. That's a distraction. That very much helps with all the funeral arrangements as well. That sort of kept me going. But once all the paperwork and the funeral had passed, I think that's when you sort of wake up and you think, oh my God, what on earth do I do now? What do I do now? That keeps you going, and it gives you something to focus on. But once that's gone past, I just thought, what do I do now? What do I do? Who am I? What do I do? How do you cope with it? Nobody gives you any lessons. Nobody talks about it, as we've found out in our group sessions. Nobody shares their grief. So you don't know how to handle it. So I think you just take each day as it comes. People don't know how to handle it, so therefore it's not that I wanted to ever bury my grief, but I just decided to just take it day by day. And I sort of made a conscious decision after Paul died that I would try and remain as calm as I could to help me deal with it as well as I could. And I think you find quite quickly as well that initially your emotions control everything you do. And you let them, because you don't know any other way to deal with it, do you? But I didn't want my emotions, you know, I think I learned as I went along, I didn't want my emotions to always control me. I wanted to take control of me.
Yes. And how did you learn to do that?
How did I learn to do that? But part of me, I've always been quite a positive, optimistic person anyway. And I knew I still always wanted to I'd still got a life ahead of me, and I didn't want it to be an unhappy one. But I think the biggest factor in it was meeting you and your group. That really started to help me, meeting you and realising that I could still have a future.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys in the group, you did create some lovely friendships as well, didn't you? You know, and I think meeting people that get it, that sort of understand not everything, because obviously all our situations are unique and we all experience it in different ways, but there's a lot of that kind of silent understanding of the, you know, a bit like, who am I, where do I fit in, where am I going, what's my life, you know, those big questions that we ask ourselves that leave us, you know, we feel stripped of our identity and our place in the world, don't we?
And I can remember I went back to work a few weeks after Paul's funeral. I went back on a phased return. I used to come home at lunchtime, and I used to just think, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen, this wasn't part of the plan. No. And over I used to think, why has this happened? You know, and you're right, you're just thrown into a world that you know nothing about.
Yeah, and it's horrible, isn't it?
And you don't know how to put it right either. No, absolutely. And I think it was you started to put things in place, didn't you? But then you said after the 3rd anniversary of Paul's death, your daughter made a comment that kind of there was a build up to that, really. I'd taken your 6-week course, which was life-changing for me, meeting other amazing, strong, courageous women. And you gave us all these tools, and I wanted to start, I think the course ran from October till sort of into December, wasn't it? And you've given all these tools, and I so wanted to put them all into place and to start working with them. And we hit another lockdown in January, and I felt like I'd come up against that brick wall. I was keen and eager, and I found that second lockdown so much harder. And it was coming up to Paul's anniversary of his 3rd death, and I knew I wasn't myself. Once again, I was letting my emotions take control of me, but I don't think I realised just how much they were taking control of me and how much I was probably changing, and not for the better. And it was a comment that Kelly made to me, and she said, I've lost my dad. I feel like I'm losing my mum as well. And it really, really struck a chord with me and pulled me right up. And I thought, this can't go on. You know, how long am I going to let my emotions take control of me? And I need to take control back. And it was a life-turning moment, a changing moment for me, that was. So I'm grateful for Kelly for being honest enough and brave enough.
Yeah, because it's hard, isn't it? To have
she was watching me unravel, and so no, and that's when I think I realised that I've got to start working on me.
and you're right. It's never easy. You know, we do have moments where we feel motivated to do things, don't we?
Yeah.
But that motivation wanes and things happen and life still throws things at us. But you know, like you say, you get to a point, I believe, that you go, I have just got to do the things I've got to do to help me, because this can't be my reality forever. You know, this isn't what I want my life to look and feel like, so I need to make some changes. But it's hard. It's really hard, isn't it?
It is hard, but once you start to make those changes, it does start to get easier. You know, I still have my sad, emotional, low days, and I allow myself to have those days on the promise that the next day I'll get up and I'm going to have a better day, and I'll plan something to do the next day. We can go for a walk or meet a friend, have a coffee, or do some decluttering. Works wonders for me, even if it's just one drawer. I feel like I've achieved something. So I am more in control of myself now and my emotions. I understand them more now. So no.
That's a really good point, isn't it? It's learning to understand you again, and
Yes.
and how you think, how you feel, how you behave, and it's very different to before, and it is that kind of that relearning, that reconnecting, understanding a new way for yourself, and that's really hard. So you've kind of touched on it a bit, but what did work for you and what didn't? Because obviously in our journeys we come across different ideas, and people share tools and strategies and things that work for them, but we're not all the same, and we don't do this in the same way. So we've got to just figure it out, haven't we? We just got to try different things and see how we get on with it. What did you try? What worked? What didn't?
I think initially I wanted to try and find a new hobby. That was my first thought. I need to find a hobby that's got a social life attached to it as well. So I've got somewhere to go out to. So I thought golf. I'll take up golf lessons. I belong to a golf club. There was a social life involved in that. So I took golf lessons. We'll leave it at that.
Not for you.
No, I could hit the ball, but I just thought, no, that's not for me. I joined Way Up. I was too old to join Way at the age of 54. So I joined Way Up and went to a meeting, and everyone there was so kind and welcoming. But I felt I was obviously too old for Way, but I felt I was too young for Way Up. They were a lovely group of people. They were in a very different place to me, Karen. They were retired. They got grandchildren. I was still working full time. A lot of their meetings were during the day. So I tried it for a little while, but I thought, no, that's not for me. What didn't work for me? Negative thoughts. Why me? Why did this happen to me? What have I done to deserve this? Of which there are no answers at all, because there are no answers.
What did you do with those?
What with those thoughts?
With thoughts, yeah.
Thought about them. And I did question why for a long, long time. And you literally just go around in circles with it, and then you realise that there is no answer and nobody's going to answer that for you. So, yes, I did think about that for quite a long time, especially on my low days. Why me? And you feel sorry for yourself, don't you? And you're allowed to be. But I did realise, I think my own positivity comes into it and said, well, that's a silly question. You're never going to find the answer to that. So, I parked those questions. Yeah. And I did. Trying to do too much, that didn't work, because I just wanted to be distracted all of the time. I didn't allow myself to just be and have some downtime, because it was too painful, because then all your thoughts just come right to the forefront again. Thinking I'll be better in 6 months' time. I can remember thinking, I just want to get to 6 months. I'll feel better in 6 months. Then you get to 6 months, you think, I want to get to 12 months. I'll feel better in 12 months' time. And that's totally unrealistic. There is, as you learn, there is no time limit on grief. So none of those things worked for me. But then you discover those over time as well, don't you? It didn't all happen, in a short space of time. What did work for me, and is still a work in progress, is you and the lovely group of girls that I met through you and continuing to meet through you. Being with people who got it, and being part of a widow community really does help me. Acceptance, that was a real big one. Took me a long time. Didn't think I would ever accept what had happened to Paul. Didn't want to accept what had happened to Paul. I thought that if I accepted it, it would mean that I no longer cared. It meant that I was okay with what had happened to him because I'd accepted it. But I realised that by not accepting it, it was blocking me from moving forward. So that was something that I discovered, and through my journaling, which we will speak about in a little while. But accepting that Paul had died helped me start to move forward. Learning to spend time with my grief and my thoughts, that helps me. Might sound a little bit odd to people not in our situation, but almost making friends with your grief. Yeah. It's a huge part of your life, and trying to work with my grief rather than allowing it to work against me.
I love
that was recognizing that by sort of denying myself that grief or denying to work with it, there again was just stopping me from helping me move forward, allowing myself to cry and feel the pain as well. You know, they all helped me to realize that I needed to do those things and to feel those things to help me move forward.
Hard to do though, because like letting the pain in, and getting to know your grief and letting that in, it's like properly scary and just horrible. You kind of, you go to these places that you didn't know existed in terms of like despair and heartache, and it's so physical, and you just can't, it's just awful. It's awful. But you're right, grief is now a companion for life, and we have to build a relationship with it. We have to get to know it and understand it and let it in, because when we do that, we're taking back our power, aren't we?
Yes.
You know, it's kind of like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's build a relationship with this, and then eventually it becomes more on our terms.
Yes,
as we understand it better, and we know how to deal with it when it kind of rears its ugly head. And I even think we get to a point where when we invite it in on our terms, you know, sometimes you get caught unawares, but certainly for me in my journey, I feel like now, you know, for the most part, I get to decide when it visits type thing, and I have those moments.
You felt earlier when I said your emotions control you can control your grief. You know, there's always going to be those sad days, those low days, when events happen, when he should be there for them, and they're always going to be bittersweet. But by allowing yourself to understand your grief it helps me cope with it better. And and accepting that grief is always going to be there. That's never going to go away, and I don't want it to go away. No,
but it doesn't always have to be painful and feel like you know you're drowning and you can't cling on to anything. It kind of evolves in that way, but it's still you're right, it's still there, isn't it? And you wouldn't want it not to be. So did you kind of read or watch anything or listen to anything that you found particularly helpful in your journey? That there are, you know, books and podcasts and talks out there, aren't there? What did you find helpful?
I can remember thinking, and I know you felt like this, Karen, that I didn't want Paul's death to define me, you know, as a person or my future, and I wanted to research grief, to find out in the best way that I could, if there is such a thing, to help me and my girls have the best chance of having a happy future. So I'd start to read a book, any book that I could find that was about grief. But if I found it too negative, I put it away. I wasn't interested. It wasn't what I was looking for. If there's anything on TV to do with grief, I watched it. I don't know what I was looking for, really. Looking back, I think I was just looking for some book or podcast to tell me that when my pain and my sadness would end. I was looking for when somebody said, well, when you get to 12 months, that's it, you'll be fine. Little did I know it doesn't happen like that. So I think initially when I was looking for reading or podcasts, that's what I was looking for. Someone tell me that when you get to 18 months' time, you will be fine. The first book that ever appealed to me was called Option B. That was by Sheryl Sandberg, and it was about building resilience in the face of adversity. And I think because her story was very similar to mine, that her husband had died of a heart attack in the gym, so I felt that instant connection. So that was the first book that I actually read. And then I can remember a TED Talk by Nora McInerney.
Yep.
Is it?
Yeah.
And it was called We Don't Move On From Grief, We Move Forward. And that really resonated with me. It really, really did. And I remember listening to it night after night. I almost couldn't get enough of it because it was just offering me hope. It was the first thing I'd listened to that offered me hope.
She does it so well, doesn't she, as well? She does it in such a humorous way, but like you say, that tragic side of her story, but also, the hope, and the positivity of her telling that story. It just, you can draw so much strength from it. And then I think I went on to read her book then, The Hot Young Widows Club, which I enjoyed. And I think that was the first time when I thought that I needed to then find or have a connection or meet others who were in a similar situation to myself. And then that led, then I think it was August 2020, and I knew I was struggling. And I can remember going to bed one night in August. I'd had a really bad day, and I found you on Instagram. And I think you must have known I was looking for you, Karen. I was there.
I instantly just connected with you and everything you stood for. Your story, similar to mine. But it was your attitude and belief that you can still have a good, happy life. And that's what I was looking for and wanted to find as well. And I just resonated with everything you said. And the rest is history.
I remember having that first conversation with you and just feeling the same about you, you know, because it's just feeling that you wanted it. I recognize so much of me in you, you know, just kind of that kind of, I just want to feel like me again a little bit, like, who, you know, find some of the answers to the big questions and find my way through this, because I want to live life. And that's a hard thing to say as well, isn't it, sometimes?
Absolutely. And it's admitting that to yourself as well, isn't it, really, you know, because you feel that you shouldn't. What else? I follow Mel Robbins as well. I like her podcasts and her enthusiasm for life. And that if you want to have a happy life, it all just come down to you and your approach towards it. And like you, she gives you the tools to help you move forward. And I've read both of her books, The 5-Second Rule and The High Five, and I've enjoyed both of those and all the science that goes behind it as well. And I apply those to my everyday life as well. Positive affirmations, love a positive affirmation. And my girls bought me a pack of them for Christmas. So every day when I get into work, I give them a shuffle and I just pick one out and I put it on my desk and it's there. And funnily enough, I wrote it down what today's one. My today's one that I chose said, "You are entirely up to you."
So true, isn't it? Do you know what? It's just, and it can just be a few words like that makes you go, oh my God, yes. You are entirely up to you. And we don't always realize that, do we?
No, not at all.
We don't always realize that
at all.
And I think that I love Mel Robbins as well. You know, I think she's absolutely brilliant. You know, and like you say, a lot of her stuff is backed by science, so it's you know, it's not just kind of the woo stuff that a lot of people think.
No, not at all. No, it all makes sense.
It doesn't it? You know, you read it and you just go, that I remember talking to you about her high five habit. You know, like give yourself I say it to my daughter, just look yourself in the eye in the mirror every morning, give yourself a high five. You don't even need to say anything. You know,
that's right.
Do it.
Because it makes you smile as soon as you do.
Yeah, and it does. It works. It just makes you go, do you know what? Yes, you've got this. You're doing all right. And I think it's that, isn't it? It's the simplest things sometimes that you can bring into your life that make the biggest difference. Yeah.
But it's finding what works for you as well, isn't it?
It is.
You know, what works for me might not work for somebody else. It's finding what works for you. And when you find something that does work for you, gosh, it's just powerful, isn't it? And it is.
But you've got to keep trying things, haven't you? And this is where having sort of that open mind, you know, I remember suggesting journaling to you, which we'll come on to in a bit, but you know, it's kind of like sometimes it's that feeling of, oh no, I don't do that. But you know, you've always had that open mind of like, do you know what, I'll try things, I'll give it a go. And I think like golf. Not for you, but you tried it and then you go, no, that's not for me, let's figure something else out. So for you, we've touched on it a little bit, but you kind of said acceptance was a huge challenge for you.
Yes. I didn't want to accept it, as I mentioned before. I felt if I accept it, then it meant that I was okay with Paul passing away, which of course is just not the case at all. But I knew it was blocking me from moving forward. And I can remember actually writing it down in my journal that I felt I was starting to accept that Paul had died. And I can remember being brave enough to write it down and breaking my heart at the same time.
Oh, bless you.
I didn't want to write it down, but I realised that gradually over time I was coming to terms with it, and I just had to admit it to myself. So that was really, really hard to accept, but also a turning point as well. What else was another big challenge for me? Another big challenge for me is loneliness. Not for the company of others. I'm so lucky to have friends and family. I'm lonely for Paul. I miss his company. So that's been quite a big challenge for me as well, Karen. You know, it's all your memories, your hopes for the future, your dreams, the special moments. You carry those now, don't you, on your own?
And that's really hard and sad, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's a really big challenge for me. I struggle with it, not as much as I did, but it's a realisation as well that you are the sole keeper or the sole owner of all those memories now, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's huge, isn't it? Because, you know, it's those conversations you have, isn't it, with your person, you know, do you remember this and do you remember that, and you've got blank spots somewhere and you're like, what did we do, what was that? And then they remember it and they fill in the gaps, and it's like,
his memory was so much better than mine.
and now you're kind of like trying to piece it all together and remember it, and you've got no one to share that with, because nobody else was there. It was your memory together.
That's right. Yeah, so that's a difficult one to sit with.
So how have you tried to help yourself in the lonely moments? Do you feel that, you know, it's something you have to learn to live with? Is there something you've discovered that helps?
Oh gosh, I think when I have those thoughts, I do sit with them. I acknowledge them. I do think that I'm lucky to have had such lovely memories. So I've got them. I won't ever lose them. And it is my intention one day, with my love of journaling at the moment, to, when I have these memories or thoughts, to write them down.
Yeah, lovely.
So I can always go back and read over them as such, really. So, but now I sit with them.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think I get that, because it's something, again, we can't fix, isn't it? We almost have to sit with it and accept that it's part of our grieving journey, because of course, you know, our person isn't here, and a lot of people say it, you know, you don't feel alone because you've got a lot of people around you, but it's you can still feel very lonely. Yeah, it's like being in a packed room. I remember on my 40th, you know, just being surrounded by everyone that I loved so dearly, but still feeling just so lonely, and like going, how is this possible? It's quite hard to get your head around, but like you say, you know, it lessens with time.
Yes, it does get softer over time. And it does.
It does. But you said as well, also special dates and going out with hard couples.
Special dates are challenging, but they're getting easier as time goes on. You know, when the dates are coming up, or special anniversaries and Christmas, very often the build up is a lot worse than when the actual date itself arrives. But you learn that again over time. You build them up in your mind, and it's almost quite a relief when those dates actually get here.
Yeah, it is. It is almost like that. Oh, I can breathe. It's not as bad as I thought. And okay, all right, we can do this. We're all right. So talk to us then about journaling, because obviously you've touched on the fact that you discovered this, you know, back in 2020. It's not something you've done before, but
no, well, it was you. I think you suggested it on one of our weekly meetings, didn't you? And it was a huge revelation to me. I can remember going to Asda and choosing a lovely notebook, one with bees on, because that was Paul's icon on his WhatsApp picture, and I got myself a pen, and I can remember opening the first page, and I just sat there looking at it and thinking, well, what do I write? I haven't got a clue. Where do I start? All these thoughts going around in my head. What on earth am I going to write? And it was on a Sunday morning. It was my first, it was in November 2020. And I think the first thing I was actually sat and wrote was how much I missed Paul's cooked breakfast on a Sunday morning. He cooked a mean full English breakfast. And I think that was the first thing I put down. It was a Sunday, so it seemed appropriate. And once I started, I couldn't stop. It was like my own private counselling session. You know, as time went on and I put more and more thoughts down, I'd write down what was worrying me, annoying me, upsetting me. And I think without even realising it, I've started to answer my own worries and my own questions, and what I needed to do to make my life easier. And I would write that down as well. And any issues I'd got, the resolutions that were coming into my mind. It was pure self-therapy for me, and it was something I'd never ever thought about before.
It's amazing, isn't it? I remember like you coming into the sessions and sharing like these like light bulb moments, these aha, you just were like, oh my God, I've just discovered this, and in my journaling and we were like, oh my God, this is so powerful. Like I think there's been a handful of clients that's worked for, you know, in such a profound way, and you're one of them, and it really was like just
it was cathartic as well, you know. And one thing it really taught me, Karen, was how to be honest with myself.
So important.
You know, and it's a safe place. You're journaling, it's yours, and you can acknowledge your thoughts, and there's nobody else there to criticize it apart from yourself. But it taught me how to be honest with myself and my feelings as well. And I think you know, writing those down as well helps you start to work through any issues that you've got.
And that's such an important point, isn't it, Debbie? Because without that honesty, that awareness, that kind of deep dive into what's going on with us, we can't do anything with it. You know, if we keep avoiding it or lying to ourselves or you know, just not thinking about it, nothing ever changes. That's how it's always been.
Yeah, and with writing it down, it grounds it as well.
Yeah,
you know, it's not still spinning around. If you've got something worrying you, you can let it spin around in your head for days, can't you?
Yeah.
And I think by writing it down, you just think, oh, I've got it off my chest now, and you know, now I come up with a resolution for it or work my way through it. But it's just I don't journal so much now. But that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I don't feel the need to journal as much, but it's still my first go-to. If I'm worried about something or something's bothering me, or I have a particularly bad day, I'll sit up in bed and I'll get my pen out with my pad and I'll write away. And but it's, you know, it still works for me, but it's not always about pouring out about any other issues that are worrying me. But it's also really important to record all the good and happy things that are happening in your life as well, and the funniest things and stories. And if you've had a nice night out with friends, or, you know, the girls have been successful at doing something, or I've been successful at doing something, to record all the good as well. So when you are having a bad day, you can go back and read that and remind yourself as well.
I love that. I love that so much, because it's so important that we still look for the good, you know, because if we don't, we're not going to see it, and we can get entrenched in the grief and the sadness and what's missing and lacking from our lives. Of course we can, but if we can still acknowledge and recognize what feels good, what, you know, what is happening around us that we're proud of, that brings us some joy, some peace, whatever. You know, to take time and go, do you know what, this was good? Because you're right, in those moments of darkness, it can feel like nothing's ever good. And actually you can look back and go, it is still, it's still there.
Yeah, that was a good day. That was a good work.
Exactly. And I, you know, I'm always kind of saying to people, just still look for that, you know, and gratitude can sometimes be too big a thing to comprehend in grief, and I completely understand that. You know, somebody said to me at the beginning, like, oh, what are you grateful for? I wouldn't have been best pleased, but, you know, think about the wins, you know, because thinking about what felt good to you in a day. And like you touched on earlier, that can be like making yourself a cup of tea, getting out of bed, having a wash, you know, that can be a win, can't it? Yeah. And as you move through your journey and these wins grow and develop, it turns into gratitude. It just naturally and it evolves in that way, and it does help to uplift you, and it does help you to see that there is still good in that. So that's I love that. I think that's so important, you know. How what about the secondary losses, Debbie? There's so many, and you know, it's never just about the fact that our partner's died. That it affects every corner of our universe, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
How did you navigate them?
I'd never even heard of the term secondary losses.
No.
Never came on my radar, and why would it, Karen? And I don't think anyone fortunate enough to still have their loved one or their partner with them would even they wouldn't know what it meant if you mentioned it to them. I think the sort of first time I thought about it, I think I first considered my secondary losses. They felt so overwhelming, because when you stop and think about it, you know, you usually just say, oh, my husband's died. But when you think about all the secondary losses, there's a huge amount of them, and they're more overwhelming sometimes, as much as what's happened with losing Paul. I think the first ones to me were physical ones. You're making love, you're holding hands, your hugs, the closeness that Paul and I had. Paul loved me like no one else. He always had my back. He was my go-to. He was the one person in life I could truly depend on at any time, and we had our own way of being. You know, I hadn't just lost my husband, I'd lost the father of my children, I'd lost my lover, I'd lost my best friend, my partner in making all decisions, my holiday companion, the spider catcher.
Very important role.
Very important role. I was very conscious that, you know, I was now the sole keeper of our life together, really, Karen, and he wasn't there anymore to say, do you remember when? But you don't, you know, that you don't consider all those situations, you don't consider them all in one go, do you? As different situations arise as you're going through your journey, that's when you think, oh, he's not here to do that. Oh, he's not here to do that. And that's when it hits you every time, isn't it? When something goes wrong in the house, you know, discussing finances. I had to learn to cook. Paul did all the cooking. He did all the washing. I was very spoiled. I can remember going to Asda for the first time and walking up and down the aisles, crying my eyes out because I couldn't find anything because I never went shopping. He was a doer, Paul was, and I was not. So there was all these things that I had to start doing that he did. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. Because initially you just think Paul's died, and and everything else then just starts to pile on top of that, doesn't it?
And for quite a while as well, doesn't it? You know, like you get through these different stages in your grief, and you're like, oh God, I've lost that as well, and oh God, that's going to be affected as well, and it's like, oh my God, all these things. Like, where can I turn to that still feels normal for me? And that is it's really tough, and it's very challenging, and I think it can feel invisible as well, because like you say, you'd never heard the term before, you didn't know what that was. It was like, what? And then, you know, trying to explain that to people that haven't experienced that, you know, it's hard to understand, to fathom. And they can feel like invisible losses as well, that just aren't acknowledged and recognized, and we need to grieve them all.
Yes,
you have to grieve them all. And
I mean, Paul was brilliant at DIY. He would turn his hand to absolutely anything, and I was his mate. I always used to help him. And I can remember I must started doing some odd jobs around the house, and so subconsciously I must have been listening to. I probably didn't look like I was listening at the time, but I must have been listening to him. So when things started to go wrong in the house, I started watching YouTube videos on how to put them right. And how to repair things. Some I was successful at more than others. If I couldn't do it, I asked my dad for help, and if he wasn't around, or it was, you know, he couldn't, then I would have to get somebody in to do that. But I began to realise over time that the material things I could sort out or get somebody else to sort out. But it's the emotional and physical secondary losses that are irreplaceable, and they always will be. Always will be.
And I think, you know, some of those aren't talked about enough, really. You know, especially the intimacy. That's a huge loss in it, and people don't talk to you about that, and it's awkward, isn't it? You know, people kind of clam up at the best times talking about grief, let alone talking about grief and then sex and intimacy as well. It's like, oh God, I don't want to say. And then I think there's an element of us that kind of goes, well, that seems a bit callous to be talking about missing that side of it when he's died. Like, surely I can't say that. That doesn't seem right. But it's huge. It's a huge loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know,
and it's part of your relationship, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we're feeling beings, and it's like that side of it as well. Is we grieve it hugely. We miss it hugely. It's a huge loss to us, and it's another big factor in our journey.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, grief affects us so much. How do you feel it's affected your relationship with family and friends? Because I know sometimes it can feel strained, and people don't always know how to be around us, and things can change, because we change, don't we? We change a lot, and it can affect our relationships. Do you feel like yours have changed?
I think I'm quite fortunate, actually, Karen, in this area. I've still got good, strong relationships with all my family, Paul's family, probably more so now, because I realise just how precious they are to me, and to my girls as well. I've got good relationships with my friends. I haven't lost any friends along the way. I don't think I've put anybody off. And, you know, actually, I've gained friends through the widows group and meeting other widows as well. So I count myself very lucky, really, in that respect. I don't feel that I have. My relationships have changed. That was probably grown a little bit more, really.
That's lovely.
Probably.
That's really lovely, because I know it can be another huge factor, and sometimes another loss in your journey as well, you know, because relationships can be deeply affected. But
and at work, I didn't want to be that elephant in the room when I went back to work that everybody, you know, avoided, or you know, I was walking up the corridor and somebody walking away and turning around. I just didn't ever want it to be like that. So at work, it's the one place I could still just be me.
Yeah.
You know.
And that, you know, works you know, for people in grief, sometimes it can be a lifeline, and it can be a healthy distraction, and it gets you through, and it's a bit of normality sometimes in a situation. For others, it just doesn't work out at all, and it's awful, and people can't cope. But for you, I think it has been
I've been there a long time. I love the people I work with. I enjoy my job. So it was a place that I could just go, just be me, and be accepted for who I was, and still get on and do the job. And so that was a big help for me as well, really.
Yeah. You said earlier in the conversation that you just wanted to go on and find a way of living a good life. What kind of drove you to kind of want to find that in your life? You know, was it kind of instinctive? What was it? Was there something within you that kind of kept you going and believed that you could find happiness again?
I think it's instinctive. I've always enjoyed life. I like life. I like people. I'm a positive, optimistic person naturally. You know, so I think that drive is just inside of me. It's the outlook I have, and I just always knew that this can't just be the end of my life as well. You know, unfortunately, Paul's life has ended, but mine hasn't. And, you know, and also I just wanted to just be the good example for the girls as well. But I think they tend up being a good example for me a lot of the time, really, to be honest.
Funny, isn't it? They teach us a lot.
But I think it's just a natural instinct to just enjoy life. I've always enjoyed life.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky in that respect, and I think that's helped carry me a lot of the time.
And that's driven you. That is brilliant. Did you feel guilt about it though? Were there times where you kind of thought, oh, I can't want that? Can I? Is that being disloyal or?
I don't feel that I felt guilty. Maybe that's something I should feel guilty about. But no, I didn't feel guilty. I you know, what happened to Paul, I had no choice in. It happened to him. You know, I couldn't have prevented that. So no, I don't think I did feel very guilty. I probably felt a little bit, you know, I suppose you've always got that natural guilt that you're still here and they're not. I think that just goes with losing somebody. But we had a good, strong, loving relationship. We knew how much we loved each other. And we enjoyed spending time together. We spent a lot of time together. So I didn't have any guilty things. Oh, I wish I'd done that more. I wish I'd done that more. I wish I'd spent more time with him, because we did. We loved being together and spending time together. So I'm fortunate that we did have that time and that type of relationship. So I don't have any guilt from that either. Yeah. So I think I count my blessings with that one.
Yeah. And also I think it's kind of, like you say, going, what we had was good, and focusing on the good that you had in it, rather than maybe going, oh, I could have done this and I could have done that, and you know, because you probably could if we allowed ourselves to, but do you remember it for the good that it was and the good that you did in the relationship? And like you say, you know, Paul died, but you're still here.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, that's really, really important, isn't it, to remember?
Yeah.
How do you honor Paul in your life now?
Paul suffered quite a few illnesses in his life over his years. But he never, ever allowed himself to be a victim, ever. I think he'd be disappointed if I allowed myself to be one as well. So he was strong and brave, and he never let anything stop him. So I feel that it's not that I have to be the same, but, you know, he was a good role model for me. I honour him by taking all the best parts of him with me on my journey. He was organised. If a job needed doing, he'd do it straight away, and so he never let anything sort of build up. So I tried to do that, as I mentioned before. If something goes wrong in the house, I tried to fix it. He hated spending money on a job that he could do himself, so I tried to do the same. So I think he'd like that. He got lots of good, strong qualities Paul had, so I do like to carry those forward with me. Oh gosh, I can remember in one of our sessions that you said to us that, you know, when I was doing my journaling, to make a list, not to put our loved one up on a pedestal, and to be realistic about them, and to make a list of the things that maybe we didn't agree with or may dislike about them, along with a list of all the things that we did like about them. And I was very relieved to find that my list that I liked was far longer than the one that I disliked. And you know, and I'll read back some of those, and those are some of the qualities and parts of Paul that I will take forward with me, and I feel like I keep a part of him with me then in my everyday to-day life by doing that, and I think he'd approve of that. And also honouring Paul thought the world of me. He absolutely did. And I think I can honour Paul's life by honouring my life too.
That's beautiful.
You know, he adored me, and I was, and I still am, a lucky girl for that. So I think he would want me to honour my life as well.
Actually giving me shivers. My whole body has got shivers. Do you know what? That's such a good point, isn't it? You know, we talk about honouring our person and taking them forward with us, which I believe is, you know, super important, and, you know, continuing those bonds with them and bringing them with us in our hearts. But you're right, you know, we have to honor our lives as well, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so,
I love that, Debbie. I think you know, that's such a poignant reminder, I think, to all of us that, you know, we're here. We're alive, and yes, you know, it's tough sometimes, and things happen, but life is a gift,
It is.
And we can make it good again, you know, and it's kind of figuring out how we can do that in the best way.
And we have to live it for those that can't live it as well. And, you know,
yes, 100%. So what would you say your grief, your loss has taught you? What have you gained from it in terms of perspective, opportunities, discoveries about yourself? You know, I think there's always lessons to learn. And again, I think that takes time to be open to that idea. But, you know, for where you are in your journey now, what would you say that it has taught you?
I think initially, if I turned, you know, I would have probably a while ago turned around and said, oh, you know, that my life has not moved forward since I've lost Paul. But when I stop and I look back now, I've learned so much, Karen, so much. I've learned that I value life more than I ever did before, how fragile it is and how your whole world could just be turned upside down and inside out in a moment. It's taught me to value the day that you're in and make the most of the day. You never get that time back again, do you? It's taught me patience. It's taught me how much people care about me and are there for me. How much support is there, but you have to also reach out and accept it. You don't have to cope with it all on your own. I realise how much others must have been hurting at the time as well, but you're so much in your own grief that you don't necessarily pick up on that because you're in your own world. It's taught me how to listen. Other people have spent time listening to me. It's taught me how to listen to other people. Opportunities. I've got an opportunity to discover a new me. I think you've got a choice on this one. You can either stay where you are in your grief or try hard to find out about yourself. And I know that's hard and it takes time to do. But when I look back at my life with Paul, and I would have it back in an absolute instant. But you get involved in your own life, don't you? Get engrossed in your own life, and it's a busy life, and you've got your work and you've got your family and you've got your children and clubs or whatever they may go to, or activities. And, you know, you do all, the house takes over and everything else. And you plan things to look forward to, but you never actually stop and take time to probably think, is this who I want to be? Is this where I'm going? You know, where's my future? You just get involved in your day-to-day tasks and your life just moves on, doesn't it? But I now have an opportunity to create a life for me and find out about me, to take that time to do that, to try new things, try things that might interest me. Or, oh gosh, I'm on a journey of self-discovery and broadening my horizons, and some people might find this hard to understand, but sometimes I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's quite empowering and liberating, isn't it, when you kind of reach that point in your journey where you go, do you know what? I'm in control. I get to decide. Yeah. And it is scary. Of course it's scary, and it can be lonely and filled with anxiety and fear and all that kind of stuff. But it can also feel quite exciting and liberating and empowering. And you know, because you start to learn things about yourself that you didn't know were there.
No, that's right. You know, and I am, and I spend time, you know, I'm just finding out about myself every day, you know, that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I'm brave at trying things that I never thought I'd do. The resilience that I have. And maybe that person was always there, Karen, you don't know, but life takes over, doesn't it? Or you just get on with your day-to-day life, or you don't come across situations that make you stop and look at yourself. You know, I've spent so much of my life being more of a couple than as an individual. And now, you know, yes, I'm still a mom, obviously, but I'm finding out more and more about myself. And I quite like myself, actually. I found out I quite like myself.
I love that, Debbie. I like you too.
Thank you. I like you too.
Sure, everyone listening likes you, because you are so lovely and so warm, and as I said at the beginning, you know, watching you on this journey of self-discovery has been such a beautiful thing to observe. It really has. You know, you have taken anything that has been presented to you and tried it and gone with it. You've pushed yourself. You've really stepped out your comfort zone at times, and you've always remained positive in the whole thing. You know, I'd absolutely, you know, even on the darkest days when it's been heavy and horrible, there's always been that glimmer of positivity and hope that still shines within you.
Yeah, there's always hope.
Always.
You know, it's not the life I envisioned for myself at all, Karen.
No.
You know, absolutely isn't, but it's still a life, and it's my life to make now.
Yes, and you're doing it so beautifully. Before we finish, I like to just ask people, what advice would you go back and give to that new widow when you first lost Paul, that might help other widows in their journeys now?
Have no expectations of how you think others should perceive how you should be in dealing with becoming a widow. Because I think we think a lot of the time with, what will other people think if I do this or do that? Learning to be kind to yourself as well. You don't really understand what that means at first. It's the simplest of things, isn't it? And it is sometimes just taking that time to make yourself a cup of tea, giving yourself some space. Don't do anything you feel uncomfortable with. Listen to your gut instinct. It's hard making decisions at that time, and it is, but listen to your gut instincts and do what you think is right for you. Ask for help when you need it, because people want to help you, and they do want to help you. It's such a personal journey. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. It's very individual to you. What else? For me, I think what helped me was finding a group that you can confide in and spend time with. And being part of the widow community really helps and supports me. And understand that there's no set time on grief. It's huge. And gradually over time, you will build your life around it. And I think I've probably said this to you before, Karen, but, you know, people say that time heals, but it's healing that takes the time. That's how I like to view it.
So true, isn't it? Yeah. It really is, you know, and I think there is an expectation, a perception, a belief, whatever, at the beginning of our journeys that, you know, in a certain amount of time that, you know, you'll get to a point where you're healed. And, you know, as you discover, as you go through this journey, you kind of start to realize that's not how it works. You know, healing does take time. And I believe actually that probably is a bit of a lifelong journey as well, because as we go through it and different things happen, other things come back up, and big moments become bittersweet, and we have to work through those, you know, as if you've got children, watching them grow and achieve things, and, you know, even yourself, there's always those moments. And healing does take time, and a lot longer.
Well, it may well take forever. But we'll always be healing, and your needs change as your time goes on as well, and it's learning to go with those needs and work with them, isn't it? So
exactly. Oh, Debbie, honestly, I love chatting to you. I could chat to you for hours. You're so wonderful. And, you know, you've shared so much here that people will be able to resonate with and draw from, and, you know, just offering that clarity, that hope, that positivity in a dark, difficult place. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Bless you.
Thank you,
Debbie.
Take care.